Welcome on board to the Alien Spaceship talk show with Emmy Hikins and Trevor, a podcast where no topic is off limits. Fasten your seatbelt, stick the kettle on, you're in for a bumpy ride. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Englishman, he was born, believe it or not, in a place called Thorne in West Yorkshire, or at least in the West Ridings of Yorkshire. So he was born up there. And more trivia, he actually died. He died, I think, in 1910 in a place called Annerley on the southern outskirts of London. And believe it or not, within a stone's throw from the ground of my football team. So whether at Crystal Palace, so whether he'd seen one or two poor performances too many, which brought his end on, I don't know. But he died, strangely enough, very near to where Palace play their football. But he was a very clever, successful businessman in England, and he started the Thomas Crapper Company, which was basically a plumbing company. And he did get nine patents, so he did deserve a lot of credit. And two of those, for example, one was he invented the ball cock. You remember a ball cock in a toilet system?
Yeah.
This big ball which goes up and down with the water. And he also amended the S-bend. Obviously, that's going to cause a few blockages. And he created the U-bend, which I suppose makes for other blockages. But we could say the mind boggles, but that would be a bit of an inappropriate comment, wouldn't it? But yeah, so he was very involved. And in fact, I would tell you that the Thomas Crapper and Co. Limited is a company still running, still going in this country, in America, in Hong Kong. So very successful. Strangely enough, we didn't use his name. We didn't say, well, I just got to go to the crapper. put it mildly. We didn't do that. But strangely, in the First World War, when American soldiers were stationed in England, they would every day they used the toilet. They saw this sort of system which said Thomas Crapper Company, so they got to call it. They were going to the crapper. They called the toilet the crapper, and they took that back with them to America, which is why Americans apparently call. I've never heard them do it, but they call a toilet the crapper as one of the things they do use to call it by that name. And of course, something the Americans say, I've got American friends, and they will often say, if they're annoyed about something or someone, they'll often say, oh, that's a load of crap. So they tend to use that word. And of course, that word is used here as well, not as a serious expletive, I don't think, but it is but it's all linked to Thomas Crapper. Right. Sometimes people think, when they say, oh, Thomas Crapper, he responsible for the word crap. And no, it's just a legend, but it's true. That is his name. Sorry, Rose, were you going to speak?
I just recently heard about, all the castles and everything, that the gentry and the nobility, and that they would have palaces, and then they would go from one palace to the next palace, and they would move. And one of the reasons that they did that, and I only just found this out, was they did have toilets, but the toilets just flushed into the cellars. And where the palace smelt really badly. And so they would all move out, lock, stock and barrel, to the next palace that they owned, and until that one had all been cleaned out underneath. So can you imagine that? They didn't actually, it's just like you go to the toilet, but it just goes down into sort of like a cellar. And eventually all of that, and that's before they had sewers and everything. Wow. And Victoria was actually, Queen Victoria was instrumental in sort of the sewage systems and everything in London and getting that all started, to my knowledge. So I just
that's right. But you're absolutely right. And of course, some of those where you sat on a hole which went down to the floor. They were like communal as well. You just had a series of holes there. And actually some of them in the Middle Ages, some in medieval times, some of those didn't even go into a cellar. They just went into a sort of a specialised floor outside. I suppose that's why somebody said we didn't get civilised until that changed. And in fact, the first person to create some sort of flushing system, a very early version of that, was someone called Sir John Harrington. and he was a godson of Queen Elizabeth I, apparently, and he developed this thing in the 1500s. And for 200 years, the wealthy had a version of his flushing toilet, so-called, in their homes, with the rest of us just sort of happily going into these communal places. Well, I'm not sure happily, but to these communal places of that. Another little interesting trivia there is another word the Americans often use for the toilet is the John. You may have heard them say the John.
Yeah.
And that was based on, Sir John Harrington, the Queen Elizabeth I's godson. So yeah, he did the first of the flushing toilets, but then in 200 years later, that's when Alexander Cummings came along and really improved it with a water closet. So that was a big step. And I think in the 1800s, they realized that poor sanitation caused disease. So they had to move it forward. And that's where our mate Thomas Crapper came in. He really did a lot of good things with plumbing. And again, I say again, these people did.
We're going to take a short break now. We're back shortly. You've been listening to the Alien Spaceship Talk Show with Trevor Gear and Emmy Hikins. The Alien Spaceship Talk Show podcast is looking for sponsors. If you're a company out there looking to spread the word about the products and services you provide, please get in touch with Deepstuff Radio Podcast on info@deepstuffrecords.com. Or to use the contact form on our website to contact us, please visit radio.deepstuffrecords.com. Also, if you're looking to get involved on the Alien Spaceship Talk Show podcast, reach out via our Deepstuff Radio Facebook page. Thank you.